So I guess if someone has gone through that idea and they're doing their best to take your, your 3 steps at forgiveness and moving on, how does someone, friendship, spouse, family members, etc., how do you begin to regain trust
Yes.
so that relationship can get better again?
Yeah. And that is, of course, exactly. That's the next thing to consider. And you can't, I talked about forgiveness being an inside job. It's like, no, that's your own personal work. You got to figure that one out. But trust involves both parties. And interestingly, what I claim is trust involves both parties. And it's not just about the person who was cheated on learning to trust the cheater. It's actually about the cheater also learning to trust the one who was cheated on, which sounds like, well, what do they get any consideration for? They're the ones who, did the bad thing. Well, that's true. But probably, this wouldn't be terribly surprising, when somebody's been cheated on, their reaction wasn't exactly kind, usually. And again, I'm not saying it isn't deserved. I understand why getting like super pissed off and, being quite mean to the person who cheated on you is a totally understandable response. I'm just observing that they're going to have a hard time trusting you too. So
Right.
that ends up working both ways. And the way you can possibly develop trust, and sometimes what you encounter there is deal breakers. It's like, oh my God, I see the problem here. And I've met a handful of people over the years where it seems like, wow, the problem here isn't that there's fundamentally anything wrong in the relationship. The problem is that this one particular person just really isn't wired for monogamy. They just don't want to be able to, they want to offer that commitment, but they can't seem to pull it off because they
Right.
just don't seem to be wired that way. The sort of guys I've met where if they were in, let's say, Saudi Arabia, they'd have 5 wives and be nice to all of them, They really love women, but not just one at a time.
Right.
Occasionally, I don't mean to be too simplistic, but occasionally I'll see that. And that's like a deal breaker. It's like, well, if what you want is monogamy, you're probably not going to get that from this person. So, either renegotiate that or figure it out. But
Right.
if what you're looking is a trust again, where you both agreed on what it is you're trusting each other about, that's something that you have to be able to understand what happened, develop some kind of narrative that feels right to you so you can wrap your brain around the idea that this person who hurt me has now grown. We have a couple have now grown so that we now know what to do rather than that happen again. Do you know what I mean? We now have knowledge we didn't have before because we all have that experience. I don't know if you remember as a little kid learning how to read, but once you know how to read a given language, you can't not read.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Sure.
I can look at a language. I have no idea how to look at the orthography and I can see that. And if they ask me what color are those letters, I could tell you. But that little experiment they do, well, they'll have the word red, except the ink is green. And they'll ask you
Oh,
what color is that word. And you'll hesitate
yeah.
before you say green.
Hmm.
It's that you can't, once you've learned some stuff, you can't unlearn it. And it's that kind of growth that when you experience that, it's like, oh, well, we're not going to get into that place that led to the affair because look how much we've grown. We have learned so much. Our intimacy is at such a better level. I know that rather than cheating, we would be talking about it. Now,
Right.
can you know that for 100% sure? No, of course not. But you can develop that sense of, oh, we know how to handle this now, and we've been through something really hard and come through it, and that can be very reassuring. So that's what the process of building trust is about.
Okay.
It's hard. I don't want to sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
It
Well,
isn't
and I
simple.
guess the person that was let's just use the typical cheating. Someone was cheated on, then maybe they have then established that red line in their head that if this happens again, this relationship's officially over.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's a different thing to be like maybe they accept that their partner is just going to do these things and they'll turn their eye to a couple of them. And I think growing up, I grew up Catholic, and I think I was much more dogmatic with these ideas,
Mm-hmm.
that like no one gets divorced or all of these things. Whereas now, the people I've met, the people I've spoken to, etc., you just see that like there are so many permutations from how people are going to live their life, and how they're going to live them as a couple is completely different. And
Mm-hmm.
considering, like we just said at the top of the show, that only maybe 20-30% of married couples that stay together are actually happy, I would say do whatever the hell you got to do. as as
Yeah.
as long as it's working for you and both people feel like heard, respected, and you're content in your life, who gives a shit how they
Well,
what
sure.
the recipe is? Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because that phenomenon, like, what do you do if somebody cheats again or something? What I find interesting is that indeed somebody might feel like, well, all right, if it happened again, I'm very likely to split up. But those same people, and I'll often note this with them, those same people are sitting in my office saying, oh my God, if 6 months ago, if you had asked me, would I stay with my partner if I'd learned he cheated? I would never have. I would have said immediately, of course not. And here I am in
Right.
your office trying to figure out how to save this. So nobody can predict exactly what would happen until it happens. The
Hmm.
thing that they learn from going through the crisis is, we don't know exactly how we'll handle it, but you know what? I'll bet we can handle it, or I'll bet I can handle it. If somebody betrays me again and I realize, okay, I can't trust them anymore, I now have some confidence that I will be able to handle that. It won't be easy, but I know I'll be able to handle it, and then I don't have to freak out. And that, of course, bodes well for the relationship because then you can talk about stuff if
Right.
if you're not in freak out mode.